He's not broken. He's just aware. After years of emotional investment, compromise, and silent sacrifices, he no longer sees marriage as a goal, but as a system he's already outgrown. He doesn't hate love. He just doesn't worship it anymore. This isn't about fear. It's about understanding how his mind and heart now work. These are 7 psychological reasons why many mature men no longer seek a second marriage. If you've ever felt that your peace reshaped your priorities, comment, "Stillness taught me what vows couldn't." Emotional fatigue is real. He used to believe that love was worth the fight. That effort meant commitment. Those late-night arguments, emotional apologies, and endless compromises were just part of being a man who cared. But now, with distance and clarity, he sees it differently. Some battles weren't noble. They were draining. Some compromises weren't mutual. They were silent sacrifices. And some of the talking it through wasn't communication. It was emotional triage for a relationship that had already begun to bleed out. He remembers the long nights, not because they were filled with shouting, but because they were filled with emotional labor, managing her moods, tiptoeing around unspoken expectations, reassuring someone who could never be reassured. He became the emotional anchor, but anchors get heavy too. Psychologists now understand this as relationship burnout, a state where the emotional system gets so overloaded it begins to shut down, not from lack of love, but from overuse. And here's the hard truth he learned. You can love someone deeply and still lose yourself trying to hold it all together. Now, years later, with healing under his belt, he doesn't see love as a war to win. He sees peace as a boundary to protect. Second marriages often look beautiful in theory, but come with even more moving parts. Children from other unions, merged finances, and emotional baggage, both visible and buried. Even when the person is new, the pattern feels familiar, and that familiarity doesn't excite him. It exhausts him. He's not jaded. He's just aware of what his nervous system can carry and what it no longer wants to. He craves a quiet kind of closeness now, one that doesn't demand performance, fixing, or constant emotional vigilance. And if that kind of love never comes, he's still okay, because his healing cost him everything once. And this time, he won't spend it all again, just to prove he still can. He's no longer addicted to external validation. There was a time when being wanted felt like oxygen. He needed her admiration, her affection, her attention. Not because he was shallow, but because somewhere deep inside, he hadn't fully met himself yet. He thought being chosen meant he was enough, that her yes confirmed his value, that a relationship proved his success as a man. So he worked hard to be pleasing, to be needed, to be someone she could brag about, even if it meant bending himself into shapes he no longer recognized. And for a while, that approval worked like a drug. The compliments, the validation, the romantic milestones, they felt like progress. But when the relationship cracked, so did the illusion. When she withdrew her affection, his self-worth crumbled with it. And that was the wake-up call. He hadn't been in love. He'd been in pursuit of affirmation. Since then, he's taken a different road. He stopped chasing being picked. He stopped needing applause for being emotionally available. He stopped defining himself by how lovable he appeared in someone else's eyes. He turned inward. Therapists call this self-anchoring, the process of grounding one's identity in internal truth, not external reaction. And it changes everything. Now, he doesn't seek attention, he observes who offers presence. He doesn't ask, "Do you want me?" He asks, "Does this align with who I am now?" Marriage used to be proof. Now it's a choice, not a prize. Second marriage, that would require him to care again what others think, what her friends think, her family, the world watching. But he no longer builds his life for the gallery. He builds it for the quiet moments no one sees. And in those moments, he no longer feels unchosen. He feels whole. His brain prioritizes stability over novelty. There was a time when unpredictability felt like love. The thrill of the chase, the butterflies, the uncertainty of, will she call back? The drama, the making up, the emotional highs that felt like gravity was suspended. Back then, his brain was fueled by dopamine, the reward chemical, constantly chasing newness, excitement, and romantic intensity. Biologically, that made sense. Younger men are wired to pursue, conquer, and impress. Novelty wasn't just thrilling, it was identity. But now, his brain and body have changed. Science shows that with age, the male brain gradually shifts its reward system. Instead of seeking the high of something new, it begins to value stability, connection, and predictability. Not out of fear, but out of neurological wisdom. These days he doesn't crave mystery. He craves mornings that begin with calm, people who say what they mean, a pace of life that doesn't rush him out of himself. He's not looking for someone who can sweep him off his feet. He's looking for someone who doesn't knock him off center. And here's the irony. To the outside world, that can look boring. A man who doesn't light up when she walks in, who doesn't rush into declarations, who doesn't chase, text all night, or get jealous. But internally, he's never felt more alive. Because for the first time, he's not addicted to chaos. Second marriage often begins with another rush. New stories to share, new families to blend, new dynamics to navigate. But he's been through the new before. And he knows, new doesn't always mean better. It often just means louder. He'd rather sit in a quiet room than sprint through another romantic roller coaster. Because now, it's not about excitement, it's about equilibrium. And if that's not magnetic to some, that's fine. He's not looking for sparks. He's protecting the fire he's already built. Attachment patterns have shifted. There was a time when he feared being alone. Not because he couldn't handle it, but because he believed that solitude meant failure. Back then, being single felt like rejection, a gap to be filled, an emptiness to escape from. And when love came along, it felt like salvation. Not a partnership, but a rescue mission. He didn't know it then, but he was living through an anxious attachment lens, yearning to be seen, validated, stabilized by someone else. Love made the world feel safe, and the absence of it felt unbearable. So he clung. He compromised too quickly. He ignored red flags for the comfort of being held. He confused connection with completion, as if the presence of another could fix the parts of him still afraid to stand alone. But life and loss are powerful teachers. The first divorce stripped away the illusion, and what remained was silence. Long, heavy, instructive silence. Nights where no one came home. Weekends without plans. Birthdays that felt quieter than they should have. And somewhere in that stretch of aloneness, he began to realize he hadn't been broken. He'd just been unpracticed at being whole. Over time, his attachment shifted from anxious to earned security. Now, he doesn't chase affection. He welcomes it but never needs it to feel stable. He doesn't fear detachment. He understands that space is not abandonment. It's oxygen. He doesn't seek someone to fix his inner world. He already planted roots there. So when people ask why he isn't remarried, he simply says, "I'm not avoiding love. I'm just not outsourcing my identity to it anymore." Second marriage, for many, is still a way to escape loneliness. But for him, it would feel like stepping back into a version of himself he's already outgrown. He's not closed. He's just complete. And now, if love enters, it will be a choice, not a lifeline. Cognitive load makes him selective. Modern relationships aren't simple anymore. They aren't just about love, attraction, or shared values. They're systems, interconnected webs of responsibilities, schedules, blended histories, and emotional negotiations. And systems require bandwidth. In psychology, this is referred to as cognitive load, the mental effort used to process tasks, decisions, expectations, and uncertainty. When he was younger, he could handle it. He was used to juggling, career pressures, emotional dynamics at home, social expectations, family obligations. He did it all, often silently, often without thanks. But as he's aged, he's become more aware of what drains him. He no longer sees effort as proof of worth. He sees it as a cost, and not every cost is worth paying. Second marriage, while promising companionship, also demands coordination. Who pays for what? How are family traditions merged? What happens when her adult children visit? Is intimacy initiated or scheduled? What happens when expectations clash again? He doesn't mind working through those questions. But now he asks, will this add peace to my life or complexity? Because he's designed a life that breathes. Morning routines that ground him. Financial rhythms that run without friction. Friendships that feel like ease, not effort. Every decision, every person, every yes, either supports that rhythm or disturbs it. It's not about being selfish. It's about energetic alignment. He's not trying to avoid effort. He's simply unwilling to invest it into systems that don't return peace. Because burnout, as he's learned, doesn't always come from overworking. It comes from misalignment, from putting energy into things that consistently leave him feeling more depleted than fulfilled. So now, before inviting anyone into his life, let alone his home, his habits, his heart, he asks himself, will this simplify my soul or scatter it? And most of the time, if he even has to ask that question, he already knows the answer. He understands patterns and he's not repeating them. There's a moment in every man's life when he stops asking, why did that happen to me? And starts asking, what pattern did I help repeat? For years, he thought he was just unlucky in love, that maybe he picked the wrong woman, that maybe things just didn't work out. His note. But after the dust settled, after the therapy, the journaling, the quiet walks where he finally listened to his own thoughts, he saw it clearly. It wasn't just about her. It was about what he tolerated, what he allowed, what he ignored. And most of all, it was about what he believed he deserved. He now understands that the brain isn't neutral in love. It clings to what's familiar. And if chaos was familiar, if being needed felt like love, then he kept choosing women who activated that same emotional storm because his nervous system mistook intensity for intimacy. But now he recognizes the early signs. The subtle manipulation wrapped in compliments, the emotional highs followed by withdrawal, the guilt tripping that used to sound like concern, the pressure to compromise before connection is even built. This is pattern awareness, a psychological maturity where you no longer chase what once hurt you, just because it feels normal. He doesn't romanticize red flags. He doesn't fall for fast affection. He doesn't confuse shared pain with compatibility. He doesn't hate his past, he's grateful for it. Because without those chapters, he wouldn't have learned how to read people, and more importantly, how to read himself. Second marriage might look different on the outside. New person, new promises. But he knows that unless he's different, truly, the dynamic will find its way back to familiar ground. And he refuses to build a future that rhymes with his past. He doesn't need new scenery. He needs new standards. And if love can't meet those standards, he'd rather stand alone than repeat what nearly broke him. He sees love as a feeling, not a fix. There was a time when love felt like the solution. To loneliness, to purposelessness, to the quiet ache that settled in late at night when the world went still. He once believed that the right woman would complete him. That marriage would fill in the spaces left hollow by childhood wounds, unspoken doubts, and the exhaustion of always being strong. He wasn't naive. He was simply human longing for connection, like everyone else. But life taught him something deeper. Love can be beautiful, but it can't save you from yourself. He watched people get married again, hoping this one would be different, only to find that different packaging often carries the same unmet needs. He realized that unless a man has met himself, his shadows, his stories, his silence, no relationship can truly hold him. So now, he doesn't chase love. He doesn't resist it either. He simply meets it with eyes wide open, not a hole in his chest. He understands that marriage is not a rescue mission, nor a medal for surviving heartbreak. It's an exchange between two whole people, not two aching halves, hoping the other will fix what they never faced alone. He's made peace with solitude. He's made peace with not being understood by everyone. He's even made peace with the idea that love may never come again in the way it once did. And that peace? It's not bitterness. It's sovereignty. So if love does arrive again, it must come softly, without demand, without drama, without asking him to abandon himself in order to be accepted, because the man he is now doesn't need a second marriage to prove he's healed. He's not searching for another chapter to feel alive. He is the story. And that's enough. It's not fear that holds him back. It's clarity. It's peace. It's the quiet confidence of a man who's no longer proving anything to anyone, not even to himself. He doesn't reject love. He simply refuses to be rebuilt by it. He's already done the rebuilding. For many mature men, especially after heartbreak, the bravest thing they ever did was not falling in love again, but learning to stay in love with themselves. So if you see him alone at the cafe, walking his dog in the early morning, traveling light, laughing often, don't assume he's lonely. He's likely the most emotionally free he's ever been. He's not bitter. He's not broken. He's not waiting. He's whole. And if love ever returns, it must meet him where he already is, not where he used to be. If you've grown beyond the old definition of marriage, if you've found something deeper in the silence, comment below. It's not about fear. It's about clarity. Because sometimes, the most profound relationships we ever form are the ones that begin when we stop needing to be saved.